Hi, this is Jenny from fluffmonger.com, and in this video tutorial I'll be showing how to make a variety of easy to sew face masks, including a plain front and a variety of different animals. These face masks have a curve at the top, a removable nose wire, and a filter pocket. The pattern was inspired by Homemade on Our Homestead's easy to sew pattern with no pleats. I tried a number of different face mask patterns and this one fit my face the best. It gave me a good seal on the sides and the bottom. However, I added a curved top to give a better seal at the top, and I also added a pocket for a removable wire. And then I've also made a number of different patterns for making different animal faces. To put on the mask, put the loop behind your neck at the base of your head, then pull the strings taut until the sides are cinched to the sides of your face. Tie the string on the back of your head and then adjust the nose wire. To make the mask, you'll need to print the pattern. All of the patterns with the different animals and the plain mask are available at my website, fluffmonger.com. You'll also need scissors, pins or clips, a marking tool, floral wire for the nose. If you don't have floral wire, you can also use twist ties or like a 20 gauge wire. You will also need 100% cotton fabric. Cotton fabric is breathable. For the liner pieces, you're going to definitely want to use woven fabric. And for the outside, you can either use woven fabric or a jersey fabric, which is knit fabric like t-shirts. And you will also need some sort of t-shirt yarn or clothesline or shoelaces to help tie the mask around the head. If you've never seen t-shirt yarn, it's really easy to make. I will link a tutorial in the description. You basically just find a t-shirt that doesn't have a seam on the side and you cut a strip off the bottom. These are 1-inch strips, and then when you stretch the fabric it just turns into yarn, and it's really easy. For the fabric, if you plan to sell or donate your masks, I recommend washing it in a fragrance-free detergent, not using any fabric softener or dryer sheets, and not using any spray starch. And the reason I say that is because a lot of detergents and fabric softeners have fragrance in them, and that can be a skin respiratory irritant for some people. So if you don't know who's going to be receiving your masks, it's a good idea to just wash them in either fragrance-free detergent, vinegar, or you can even make washing soda from baking soda in the oven. I will also link a tutorial for that because it's really easy to make. And then you may also want some sort of turning tool. I'm using hemostat clamps, but you can also use the chopstick, and you may need a seam ripper. To sew the animals with a triangle of color on the side of their faces, you're going to trace 2 pieces for the liner pocket. You're going to cut 1 piece from the front for the belly, and then you'll cut 2 triangles for the sides of the face. You also need a bias strip for the nose piece. If you want to make a mask with a curved nose strip for the floral wire, you're going to want to cut some bias strips. And the way you find the bias is the fabric has a selvage edge, which usually has some print on it. And this is the finished edge that won't unravel. And you can cut your pattern pieces either this way or this way. It doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. And the bias strip will be cut at a 45-degree angle. So you can either cut it this way or this way. So for sewing the nose strip, we've folded our edges in and then pressed, then folded over, pressed again. And now we're going to stitch up the edges. And if you have issues with your sewing machine eating your fabric, especially with little small pieces like this, I take a little piece of paper and put it underneath. And then I just stitch over the paper. So you want to forward and back stitch at the beginning and end. And then when you pull it off, you can just cut your threads. And then you kind of have a little perforation and you can just fold your paper back. And then you can just tear it away. Like that. And I'm going to do the other side. And there's your nose strap. To sew the liner pocket, I'm going to take my 2 liner pieces and trace down the middle 3 inches on both sides. And then I'll take that over to the sewing machine and stitch over these 2 places. You want to make sure that you forward and back stitch at the beginning and end, especially a few times towards the center, because if you're opening that pocket a number of times, you want to make sure it's secure. And now I'm going to press it open. If you'd like for your pockets to have top stitching, you can go ahead and do that now. I've made this one with knit fabric, so this is like t-shirt fabric. You can use woven fabric as well. This was just what I had in these colors. And you're just going to take your triangle and flip them. Let me move this one out of the way. You're going to take your triangle and flip them right sides together. Line up your notches. And then use a pin or clip to put them in place. And you're going to do the same thing with the other one. Right sides together, line up your notches. And now I'm ready to take this over to the sewing machine and sew 1/4 inch from the edge. If you're using woven fabric, you can use your straight stitch. Since I'm using knit fabric, I'm using my ballpoint needle and a stretch stitch. So now I'm going to take it over to the iron and press the seam allowance open on the back. Now that I've sewn the triangles to the sides of the face and pressed the seam allowance open on the back, I'm ready to put the nose on. And for this one, I've sewn the nose with stretch fabric, but you can use woven fabric. And I've also linked a few different ways to make the nose if this way is too complicated. So for sewing the nose, you're going to take your nose pattern piece. I folded mine in half just so that I can mark the top and bottom. And you're going to take your fabric, whether it's woven fabric or stretch fabric, and fold it over so right sides are together. And then you're going to trace with something that is visible. I find that white artist pens, white gel pens work. If you don't have that, you can use chalk or whatever you can find that will help you draw that line. And so I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine. And I'm going to use a stretch stitch and a ballpoint needle. That way I won't make holes in the t-shirt fabric. And if you don't have a stretch stitch function on your machine, you can just do a straight stitch along the line like you would with woven fabric. And then you can make a little zigzag stitch along the very outside edge of your straight stitch. So I'm going to do a stretch stitch first, and then on the second one I will do a straight stitch with a zigzag stitch around the outside. When I get to the curves, I'm just going to lift up my presser foot and pivot, and then press it down again. And now I'm going to do the straight stitch with the zigzag stitch around the outside edge. Okay, now I'm going to switch over to my zigzag stitch. You actually should change to an open toe foot, but my smallest zigzag stitch is actually small enough to fit inside of this straight stitch foot, so I'm just going to not bother changing it. And I'm going to make my stitch length a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make sure that the needle goes down on the outside edge of that line that I was sewing. And now I'm just going to stitch around the very, when the stitch comes in, I'm going to be on the line, and then when the stitch goes out, I'll be outside the line. And now they're ready to cut out. So now that you have your nose pieces stitched, you can go ahead and cut them out. I'm going to cut a little bit closer for mine because I'm using stretch fabric. If you're using woven fabric, you'll want to leave at least 3/16 of an inch around the edge, and then we will just cut into the seam allowance to leave little notch marks. So now I'm going to just snip into the seam allowance to the edge of the stitch line, but don't cut into the stitch line. And now I'm going to pinch my fabric together and just cut a little snip on just one side of the fabric, so don't cut through this side. Just a little snip. And then you can use either hemostat clamps, or you can use a chopstick or the blunt side of a pencil to help flip it. And now you're going to take either your chopstick or your hemostat clamps or pencil and just gently push the seam allowance out. And that will give you your nose. It's a little wonky right now. I'm going to actually take it over to my iron and hit it with a steamer. Just kind of press it down and steam it for a second, and then you can take your chopstick or your hemostat clamps and go in and kind of push the seam allowance out some more, and just keep doing that over and over again until you get it shaped the way that you want. So I have my nose pin in place, and I'm going to top stitch around the edge to secure it. So we're almost ready to attach the liner pocket to the front of the animal face. So whether you're making the corgi, the tiger, a hamster, a cat, or anything else that has those little triangles of color on the side of the face, you're going to do the same thing for this step. So we have our straight edge up here for both the liner and then the face. And we're going to attach the curved nose strip to the inside of the liner pocket. So that will be this piece after we put that on there. So right now I'm going to take the tracing template for the curved nose strip. And the reason that I'm doing this now instead of cutting the fabric like this initially is once you start ironing and sewing the fabric, it kind of shifts a little bit, so that nose would be kind of crooked from piece of fabric to piece of fabric. So I'm just going to go ahead and trace that now, and then I can cut all of them together. So I'm going to trace the top and make sure I get the center. And I've actually I printed this on cardstock, and then I took a craft knife and just cut along the inside. That way I can also trace the stitch line. You can just do this with one piece of paper, you don't have to have two. Now I can cut all 3 pieces of these fabric together at the same time. Also, I forgot to mention, if you're making the tiger, before you sew these all together, make sure you already have your stripes on there. You can either use the same method that I did for the nose, or you can use an applique method. I've linked some other tutorials for using applique down in the description. So now that I have the curved edge, I can go ahead and take my nose strip and I can attach it to the inside here. So I'm going to line up the center. And then just pin it in place. And then I'll take it over to the sewing machine and baste it. So now that the nose piece is pinned in place, I'm going to go ahead and baste it. So now I'm going to top stitch this side down. You want to go back and forth a few times at the edges just in case people are slipping their nose wire in and out a lot. You don't want this pocket to come loose. So now that I have the nose strip top stitched to the liner pocket, I can go ahead and attach that to the front of the animal face. So I'm going to lay these with right sides together, so make sure that your nose pocket and the animal's face are facing each other. I'm going to line these up with each other and then either pin or clip them in place. And then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to keep clipping all the way around. And I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from the edge across the top, down the bottom, down the sides and the bottom, and then when I'm ready to flip it right side out, I can just use the liner pocket for flipping. So for some reason my camera decided to cut off while I was filming stitching the pieces together, but all I did was I used a straight stitch 1/4 inch from the edge all the way around, and then this part is optional, but I also did a very narrow zigzag stitch around the edges on the outside of my straight stitch. That's just because if you're going to be washing your mask a lot, you might want just that little bit of extra security, but it's optional. I also clipped the corners, and now I'm ready to flip it right side out. Now you can use your hemostat clamps or your chopstick to kind of poke the corners out. I'm also going to take this over to my ironing board and use the steam setting and just kind of press it, and the steam kind of helps you be able to manipulate the fabric a little bit. So if you're having kind of wonky edges, just steam it and then you can kind of pull it into the position that you want. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then bring it back. So I flipped the animal face right side out and pressed it, and I've gone ahead and folded in the edges about 3/4 inch. And I have my cord. I'm using t-shirt yarn, and this should be about 50 inches long. T-shirt yarn stretches, so 50 inches is plenty for this, but if you're using something like shoelaces or clothesline, anything that doesn't stretch, you'll want to make it at least 50 inches long, if not a little bit longer. And so The loop of the t-shirt yarn goes at the bottom of the mask, and the ends you'll want to tie off so that they don't pull through when it's inside the mask. So I'm going to put little knots at the end, and those will go at the top where the curved nose piece is. And I'm just going to pin those in place. And the Corgi that I'm making has two different colors. If you want, you can just stitch on the inside with just one color. I'm going to try to change, so I'll use this kind of brownish color at the top, and then I'll go into this cream color at the bottom. But I'm just going to stitch up both sides from the edge, and then that way my cord will be in place. And when you're at the ends, at the top and the bottom, you'll want to forward and back stitch a few times to make sure that the cord is secure. To make the nose wire that will go inside the nose pocket, you're going to take some floral wire and cut a piece about 6 inches long. Make sure you're wearing some safety protection for your eyes. And then you'll take a pair of pliers and bend in the end. You can bend it in either once or twice, and then you'll just kind of pinch it down until it goes in, until it doesn't have any places to snag, and it can go in and out smoothly for washing. To wash your face mask, you'll want to tie your string into a knot so that it doesn't come through the loop. You want to take out your nose wire, and then either wash it in a laundry bag, or if you don't have a delicates bag, and if you don't have one of these, you can just stuff it down into the bottom of a pillowcase and tie off the top. If you're looking for places to donate masks, consider your local refugee resettlement agencies. I'll be donating all of these to Every Campus of Refuge, which is a local agency here in Greensboro, North Carolina. You can find the pattern and tutorial for this mask on my website. I've included a link in the description. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the thumbs up button and the subscribe button for my YouTube channel. You can find me and my fluffy friends at fluffmonger.com and on social media.